You've probably seen a dozen polymer pistols on the shelf, and each one looks like it came out of the same cookie-cutter mold. You've heard about the endless debate between 9mm and 45 ACP, maybe even witnessed people going back and forth on social media about which one is better. In this video, we'll talk about the rebirth of a century-old pistol design that's captured the hearts and wallets of gun owners across the country and why it's dominating sales in 2025. The handgun we're focusing on has a story that began in the early 1900s, when the U.S. military needed a sidearm with more authority than what they were carrying. You might recall stories about the .38 long Colt round failing to stop determined attackers in harsh conditions. That eventually led the Army to adopt the pistol we now know as the M1911, a design by John Moses Browning. His creation was a single-action, all-steel 45 ACP masterpiece that served as America's standard sidearm from 1911 well into the 1980s. It went through 2 world wars, countless other conflicts, and became synonymous with dependable performance in the worst possible environments. Soldiers in trench warfare raved about its stopping power. Military trainers appreciated its relatively simple mechanics. Gunsmiths found it easy to modify with different triggers, hammers, and sights. It also had that crisp trigger pull that many folks still consider one of the finest in the handgun world. At the time of its inception, the 1911 was revolutionary. It used a short recoil system that helped handle the powerful 45 ACP cartridge, and it gave warfighters more immediate firepower than many earlier revolvers. Fast forward through major conflicts, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and you'll see the 1911 proving itself over and over again, earning a near-legendary reputation for reliability and a certain intangible quality that made soldiers love it. Yet, as with everything in the firearms industry, there came a point where the brass decided a change was necessary, especially when militaries around the globe began standardizing on the 9mm cartridge. That shift happened formally in 1985, when the U.S. Armed Forces moved from the 1911 to a new 9mm double-action pistol, the Beretta M9. Some greeted this move with open arms. Others lamented the departure from the tried-and-true 45. In any case, the 1911's official days in standard U.S. military service seemed numbered. But if you assumed that spelled the end for John Browning's design, you were wrong. The 1911 wasn't going to fade away without a fight. It stayed strong in the civilian market, where enthusiasts kept customizing and shooting it in every discipline from bullseye matches to IPSC competitions. Special operations units in the military even continued using modified 1911s long after they'd been replaced in the regular service. People simply loved the all-steel feel, the perfect angle of the grip, and that sweet, short trigger pull. All the while, the world of ammunition was evolving, especially surrounding 9mm, the 40 Smith & Wesson, and the 45 ACP. Before the mid-2010s, each of these calibers had a strong following. The 45 ACP was considered the classic heavy hitter, the 40 Smith & Wesson, which was created as a weaker but more manageable version of the 10mm, after the Miami-Dade shootout in 1986 to offer more power than 9mm without going all the way up to 45. And 9mm was known for greater capacity, lower recoil, and easier handling. For quite a while, all three coexisted quite comfortably in law enforcement and civilian markets. Back when gun forums were a thing, these three all had a loyal following. But in 2015, the FBI released a study that essentially reignited the 9mm revolution. The Bureau announced it was switching back to 9mm after initially blaming it for the failures in 1986, because modern hollow-point technology had made 9mm far more effective. When top law enforcement agencies adopt a particular round, you can bet the rest of the market pays attention. After the FBI's announcement, departments nationwide started pivoting away from 40 Smith & Wesson. Police officers and private citizens gravitated toward 9mm for its lower recoil, cheaper cost per round, and higher capacity. Bullet designs such as Federal HST, Spear Gold Dot, along with various bonded hollow points, advanced to the point that expansion was far more consistent. Barriers were less of an issue, and over-penetration wasn't as worrying as it had been in the early days of 9mm usage. The final piece of the puzzle came from the realization that if 9mm could do just as well as 40 or 45 in defensive scenarios while offering more rounds, it was a no-brainer for many people, from law enforcement to concealed carriers. This obviously affected 1911 enthusiasts too. While the classic 45 ACP 1911 is still around for tradition's sake, modern shooters started wanting 1911s in 9mm. Competition shooters love that they can run faster splits without the sharper recoil of 45. Carry-minded folks enjoy a slimmer form factor when looking at commander or officer-length frames in 9mm. Even though the original 1911 blueprint is set for 45 ACP, people figured out how to adapt it perfectly to smaller cartridges, and that's become immensely popular. Going back a bit, there was a key moment in the late 1980s that paved the way for the bigger developments we're seeing now. In 1988, Para Ordnance released a double-stack 1911 frame, which was a revelation at the time. Instead of the single-stack 7-round magazine typical of the 1911, this new frame could hold 14 rounds of 45 ACP, or even more if you moved to 38 Super. Imagine the same crisp single-action trigger, the same overall ergonomics, but suddenly you had double the capacity. The only drawbacks were added bulk in the grip and quite a bit more weight if you were using an all-steel build. Still, for competition shooters in USPSA and IPSC, it was revolutionary. You now had a classic 1911 trigger and control layout, plus more ammo in each magazine. Not long after, in the late 1980s, Virgil Tripp and Sandy Strayer took that double-stack concept a step further. They formed STI, Strayer Tripp International, and introduced the so-called 2011 platform. This was a giant leap forward. Instead of the original 1911's all-steel frame, STI crafted a modular design with a steel upper assembly that held the slide rails and dust cover, and a polymer lower section for the grip. It cut weight, allowed interchangeable grip panels for different hand sizes, and offered higher capacity magazines in 9mm, 40, or 45. Many people discovered that 9mm fit the 2011 concept perfectly, letting them stuff 20 or more rounds in a mag. These pistols immediately dominated the competition circuit, becoming a common sight in open and limited divisions. For a while, 2011s remained in that niche world of competitive shooting. Then a shift occurred when STI realized they could tune these pistols for duty and carry use, not just for race guns with massive compensators and red dots. A little under a decade later, they rebranded their company as Staccato and started offering more practical, duty-focused 2011s with standard barrel lengths, iron sights or slide cuts for micro red dots, and less aggressive styling. Lo and behold, police departments and elite units began adopting them. The U.S. Marshals Special Operations Group, for example, picked up Staccato pistols, giving them a level of credibility that's hard to ignore. That also signaled to the general public that these double-stack 1911 designs weren't just competition toys anymore. So, how did we arrive at 2025 with double-stack 1911s outpacing many polymer-framed handguns in sales? Part of the reason is that the market has been saturated with polymer-framed striker-fired pistols for years. Don't get me wrong, polymer guns like the Glock series, Smith & Wesson M and Ps and SIG P320 are hugely popular, especially after the U.S. military adopted the P320 in 2017 and the introduction of high-capacity micro-compacts like the SIG P365 in 2018. But as time went on, these types of pistols started to feel a bit too common, and common means boring. When your local gun store's display case is filled with a dozen black plastic frames that all look nearly identical, you might start to crave something different, something that brings back an older aesthetic, a more visceral experience, and a trigger you can truly appreciate. That craving turned into a full-blown resurgence by 2024. Shooters wanted a firearm with deeper mechanical involvement, better ergonomics, and a sense of legacy. The modern 2011, chambered in 9mm, checked all those boxes. You get a hybrid steel and polymer frame that balances recoil superbly, plus a magazine capacity that rivals or surpasses many polymer guns. The single-action trigger encourages accurate shooting, making even newer marksmen feel more precise. And if you're into red dots, many of these pistols come out of the box ready to mount an optic. Throw in a rail for a light or laser, and you have a thoroughly modern fighting handgun that also harks back to something classic. It doesn't hurt that Hollywood gave these guns some serious spotlight. Taran Tactical's creations for the John Wick movies turned heads, especially that Pit Viper, essentially a high-end 2011 customized to the hilt. Seeing that sleek shape and rapid-fire shooting on the big screen convinced more folks to see what the fuss was about. The result? A wave of demand for double-stack 1911s from multiple manufacturers. And here we are, living in a time when plenty of gun owners say, "Sure, I have a Glock or two, but what I really want is a double-stack 1911 and 9mm. What do you think about this rise of the double-stack 1911 and 2011 pistols? Have you tried one, or are you planning to pick one up soon? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, because I'd love to see where everyone stands on the polymer versus metal debate, as well as how people feel about 9mm's place in a design originally made for 45 ACP. But going back to the topic, today, there are a handful of major players offering 2011s or double-stacked 1911s. Staccato leads the charge with several models like their Staccato C, C2, CS, HDP4, and 4.5. Wilson Combat has its EDC X9 series, along with newer designs like the SFT9 and Division 77 Project 1. SVI Infinity continues to build some of the most elaborate custom configurations on the planet, like their new Calvin's Cherry, where you can tailor every component to your preferences. Then there are mid-priced contenders, such as Springfield Armory's Prodigy line, BUL Armory's TAC Comp, Fowler Industries Vanta 9, and Kimber's 2K11 Target. Each brand aims to balance modern manufacturing techniques with that vintage 1911 feel. You also have smaller but more specialized companies like Oracle Arms, which is doing interesting things with its 2311 Compact Pro that can take SIG P320 mags. Nighthawk Custom builds the double agent, merging its gunsmith expertise with the double stack format. GP Arms and Watchtower Firearms have their own interpretations, focusing on performance and aesthetics. And if you're on a tighter budget, there are entry-level options like the Mac Duty 9 from Military Armament Corp or the EAA Gerson Witness 2311. All of this proves one undeniable fact. We live in a golden era of 2011 options. People have realized that a well-built 2011 can be carried daily, used for duty work, serve as a home defense firearm, or dominate in competition. That sense of tradition blended with cutting-edge efficiency is hard to beat. The phenomenon reminds me of how vintage cars with modern engines attract collectors. They have character, yet they also meet present-day standards. Maybe it's just me, but I can't help feeling excited whenever I see new 2011 models on display. It also boggles the mind that these are all just a modern take on John Browning's original 1911. Then again, it's understandable. The market is overflowing with polymer-framed pistols, which are fine tools, but sometimes you want something more enjoyable to shoot, something that sparks a connection every time you squeeze the trigger. I say the 2011 platform provides exactly that. But what do you think? Do you have a favorite 1911 or 2011? Let's talk about it in the comments section. And while you're down there, please like, share, subscribe, and click on the bell icon for more of these videos. Thanks for watching.